Zach, this week on Buffering, we are talking about AI slop and how it is giving people an excuse to not use the tools that they probably should.
Love talking about AI slop because I think a lot, Gabe, but number one, I think AI slop is the reason that people are a little bit more skeptical with AI these days. And number two, when I think of AI slop, do you know what I instantly think of? LinkedIn.
I'm going to guess
sorry.
LinkedIn.
all my LinkedIn stands, your posts are so bad. I don't care about your cringy life stories that you use ChatGPT to generate. But and I'm sure I just offended half the podcast. But come on, be authentic.
Only
I don't want to
half?
see your slop. Oh, and then LinkedIn has
man.
that new report AI slop button. I have abused the heck out of that button. I'm reporting people's posts left and right. So
I forgot they added that button.
Yeah, keep posting
that button.
Keep posting your post and keep posting your images. But just know I'm out there policing LinkedIn.
I saw a super annoying one yesterday. It was like a 4-box cartoon, right? And so it was somebody in the top left saying, how am I going to write this, 12-page report for my boss by tomorrow? And then they use AI to do it, obviously. And then the bottom 2 boxes show the boss going, how am I going to read through this 12-page document? Have AI summarize it for me in 5 bullet points? And yeah, it's so much crap like that out there, which is, in my opinion, exactly why a lot of people are pushing back against AI, because the things that we see on a regular basis coming out of AI are, slop is such a perfect word. I'm so glad we've landed on AI slop to describe all of this stuff. But it's resulting in this situation where people are pushing back against AI in general because of the crap that we see on a regular basis on social media, especially.
So today we want to talk about the good side of AI, some of the better use cases that Gabe and I have experimented with and seen. But one last thing there, Gabe, I saw this on Reddit last night, Reddit of all places. And in the comments, so I was researching for this episode. That's what I was doing. But in the comments, someone was saying their boss and someone else at their company were like having an argument where they, like, this person knew that they were both just using AI to send an email and then to summarize the email and write a response. It was like these two AI, coworkers like fighting against each other. And, for them, it was frustrating. For me, it was just funny to watch. But Gabe, when there's a lot we can talk about with, AI and AI slop here. And I think even the credibility here today. And I think that's really what we want to focus on in this podcast is, what can you actually be doing with AI? Or how can you be using it so you don't fall into this lazy AI slop interpretation?
Yes, and that's the bit. The real crux of this episode is not really to talk about AI slop, although it is fun. The crux of this episode is there's so much discussion right now on, is AI actually making you dumber? And this is the real conversation that Zach and I wanted to have today, which is, and again, I think we're seeing this pushback on AI because of the slop that is out there, but these are real conversations that are happening. There are research studies being done, and we're going to talk about some of these today. But I constantly am thinking about this myself because, Zach, you and I are using AI so frequently in our day-to-day lives and our day-to-day activities, and I'm of the mindset, and I believe you feel this way too, but I'm of the mindset that AI has expanded my capabilities as a person. And it is genuinely making me smarter because it is allowing me to do things that I was not able to do before, and to consider things that I had never would have considered before. But again, you hear all of this of, well, no, AI is actually making you dumber. You're decreasing your cognitive skills and decreasing your critical thinking skills. And I personally don't feel that way. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on this as well.
Yeah, but I feel like I never graduated. I feel like I'm still in school because there has not been a day over the past, I don't know how many years, where I haven't learned something new. Now, yes, I think we're all guilty of like the AI slop, as you were kind of teeing up this episode, Gabe, I thought of like, oh, like, was it me who like put the three otters in like the movie Wizard of Oz? Like, I it certainly wasn't me on Sora, but I think that platform is, you know, no
Yeah,
longer
now it's
no longer
defunct.
with us, thank goodness. But I do. I feel like I'm constantly learning something. Gabe, on a few podcast episodes ago, I talked about how the first app I ever built was in high school. And now I have, multiple apps running on cloud infrastructure. How did I learn how to do that? Because AI didn't build that cloud infrastructure, but it taught me how to do it. And now every time I spin up a new app, again, I know exactly what I'm doing. I've learned how to do this the correct way. And on that too, I've learned how to challenge my own thinking. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of going to AI and asking for an answer, but you can still use AI to challenge yourself. What's wrong with my plan? What's wrong with my argument? What's the strongest counter argument to this? What assumptions am I making? What assumptions am I making wrong? What am I overlooking? These are all things that it's, quite, opposite of laziness or,
Hmm.
more on the track of using AI as a debate partner, if you will. And I think that's more of the right way to use AI. Yes, you can probably go to AI and just get a simple, quick answer, but don't stop there.
Yep, exactly. And to go to some of these studies that have been done, and these have been done over the last few months to year, but the one that keeps coming up is this MIT study that was done pretty early, and it was looking at essay writing specifically, and they broke people down into three groups. They broke them down into a group that had LLMs to assist them in their essay writing. Then they gave the other group a search engine to be able to assist them in their writing, like all of us have had. Zach, I don't think you've ever lived in a world without a search engine. And then
Oh,
the other piece, can you imagine living in a world without
look,
Google?
dude, I remember a year ago I asked you how did they deliver pizza without like Google Maps, but that's a conversation for a different day.
Uh, and then the last group was brain only writing. And the research reported lower brain connectivity for the LLM users. And so this is the research that I feel like continues to get cited when people are doing AI makes you dumber. And I think there is an argument to be made that if you completely outsource your writing, your thinking, your decision making to AI, yes, you are going to make this problem worse. And yes, your cognitive capabilities are likely to go down. But to go back to the point that you just made there, Zach, around using it as that debate partner, that sparring partner, that person who's constantly pushing back on you. I think I've mentioned this before, but I have my Claude set up so that it actively pushes back on me basically every time I write something to it. It's annoying sometimes, and I kind of feel like it's a jerk, but because of that, I am constantly having to rethink my thought process of, oh yeah, you know what, that's a really good point. I hadn't considered that angle. Now let me rebuild this or redo this project with that fresh perspective.
Yeah, but I think back to high school and I think back to high school math, and then I
Can't even
also think
remember
back to
high
like
school.
business calculus. These very traumatic events in one lives here. Geometry and calculus. But
Ugh,
a lot of
geometry.
learning happens because you're forced to work through a problem, right?
Yes.
You can spend 30 minutes wrestling through this, whereas maybe ChatGPT or your AI tool of choice lets you skip to the answer in 30 seconds, and you skip just doing the actual work. And I think that's where a lot of people have kind of fallen victim to this, Gabe, is they go to these AI tools, they get the answer, the validation that they're looking for, but they're not actually doing any of the work, right? They're optimizing getting the answer as opposed to developing the ability to find the answer, developing the ability to learn more about a topic.
Yes. That part is so important, Zach, of the just optimizing to get the answer versus optimizing for the process to get the answer. I think about back when you first started working here,
Back in my
you used
prime.
to ask back in your prime, you used to ask me a lot of questions.
Oh gosh,
But
this Gabe was probably just annoyed.
but I will give you credit that you didn't ask questions without doing the research yourself. You were optimizing for how you get to the answer. And you never came to me with a question unless you had done the research yourself and you had kind of hit a roadblock, right? Then you would come to me and ask me a question, and hopefully I was able to provide some level of answer.
There's a
But
reason we
it's
call
this-
you Gabe GPT, Gabe.
I do appreciate that nickname. But I've accumulated some good ones over the years. But the point being is in a world where all of this, the same people who are completely outsourcing their thinking right now to AI are also the same people who would have never gone off and actually done a Google search to try and find the answer themselves and just
that's the
looked
nicest
to
way, Gabe.
other people.
I love that. That's the nicest way. I was thinking about this last night because the way I was trying to frame it was like, the people who stop at the answer probably aren't like the brightest people or the brightest tool in the shed. So I think the way you just frame that is exactly it. Instead of asking this question of, is AI making us dumber? I think it goes back to what happens to the skills when we stop practicing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And yes, exactly. And you're right. I mean, it is maybe not the sharpest tools in the shed or frankly, it's just lazy. It's a laziness factor. And there's also this laziness that I think happens with the headlines as well. And that actually probably leads us nicely into this next section, which is, okay, if you're being lazy about it, then yes, AI is probably going to make you dumber. But it's also lazy from a, I don't know, I guess a pushback perspective to just say, well, then I'm not going to use it. Or, everybody posts AI slop on social media, therefore it's bad. That's not that's not the takeaway here. Yes, there's a bunch of bad things that are coming out of AI and a bunch of stupid, annoying things as well. But if you're just washing your hands of it because you don't like the public facing view of it, that's a real problem.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think this comes back to the best AI users are not those who are just blindly trusting the output, blindly trusting the machine. They're the ones who, they have the context to challenge the response, to challenge what the AI, output is doing. Gabe, you made a comment earlier, and I'll validate this as well. But some of the things that you've built, some of the things that I've built, yes, we have that foundational knowledge. We also have day jobs. We can't sink all of our time into this, but we can build out the strategy, build out that roadmap. I know enough, code to be dangerous, mostly Swift. I know enough Swift to be dangerous. So if I can take that, translate that, and use AI to help me build an app for Android, another real use case there. It's a very valuable tool in doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a confidence level that comes into this as well. And this is kind of also the weird dichotomy that's happening with AI right now. There was another study that was done by Microsoft and Carnegie Mellon where they researched people using AI in more of a corporate environment. This was specifically knowledge workers, right? So Zach, frankly, you and me and a lot of the people who listen to this podcast. And what they found is that higher confidence in Gen AI was associated with less critical thinking. So the less you're thinking about this, the higher confidence you have in the answers that AI and Gen AI specifically are giving you. And higher self-confidence in the user's own abilities was associated with more critical thinking. So it's again that balance of not just, to your point, accepting the answer because AI says that it's the case, continuing to push back, continuing to do that research, continuing to, educate yourself around all of this. Because again, we all know the person who gets the answer and confidently says what the answer is, even though it's entirely wrong. But they say it with enough confidence that, you feel like you believe them.
Yeah. And one last thing to add here, Gabe. So, AI lowers the cost of experimentation. So before we had AI, exploring an idea, building something could take hours, days, weeks. Now you have the ability to test 10 ideas in the same time it would allow you to test one idea, right? And more ideas does mean, I think you do need more creativity. There's a bottleneck in, can I produce an idea versus how do I evaluate whether the idea is actually good and useful? And last night when we were texting, Gabe, I had a couple of examples. One of them was the calculator. Back not even my day, Gabe, not even your day, but back 100 years ago, let's say, before everyone had calculators in their pockets. you relied mostly on arithmetic, people doing this math and doing this research by hand. It's true of a lot of professions. And now we all have calculators in our pockets. We have, all these different tools that we can use to solve these equations or analyze data in real time. The other one, I made a joke about the pizza driver and not having Google Maps, but this is another good one. Back in this is before my time, but back before you had Apple Maps, you would have a physical map or you would print off directions. Gabe, we've talked about that on the podcast before. I made fun of you a little bit on that. But now you have, again, your iPhone providing or your Android phone providing you turn by turn directions in real time. And I think it's, again, not about replacing one thing or another. It's about, again, lowering that cost of experimentation and moving faster with the technology we have, being able to do more.
For sure. And one thing I would say that I think is, we've obviously had technological changes in the past, like you said, Abacus to calculator, or, printing off maps from MapQuest to, Apple Maps and Google Maps built into our phones. Those are these evolutions that happen just in technology. Where I think AI is different is it's the first technology that's really pointed at judgment, at writing, at analysis,
Reasoning,
and reasoning, problem solving. And that's been the hard part for us as humans to wrap our minds around. Is we now have this amazing technology that we can ask questions of and get answers back almost immediately. But again, there becomes this laziness factor of, if you're just completely relying on that technology, then yes, it probably is making you not as smart. I feel bad, like, just continuing to call people dumb throughout this entire podcast. But
I mean, like, don't be dumb with AI is the message here.
Maybe that's what we need to title this episode.
the calculator example, and again, like, even the GPS, like, it hasn't made us bad at math, right? Or the GPS hasn't destroyed our ability to travel. I can drive anywhere. I won't get lost as I get lost going across town tonight. But I think it feels that way to people if it's how they identify.
One of the pieces that I keep coming back to, Zach, is when I'm, especially like bigger ideas that I'm thinking about, usually what happens is these things kick around in my brain for a few days. And I had this situation a couple of weeks ago where I had an idea kicking around in my brain and I was thinking about it for a couple of days. And then I went to Claude and I had a little bit of a discussion about it. And then I went away and I thought about it for like another day or two. And then I went back to Claude and I kind of had this, it was probably over a week or, certainly over a few day time frame where I kind of had this back and forth where, I was asking critical questions, thinking about those responses and then coming back. That to me is the appropriate way to do this. Now, that was, I guess, more of a macro level, right? Where it was a larger idea that I was thinking about. But if you think about it on a micro level too, that's the way we should be approaching it. Every time we are asking for answers, is to have that little bit of back and forth versus just, okay, type in, get answer, move on to next thing.
Gabe, I made a couple comments on this earlier on, but what you just described too, I think AI can make sophisticated thinking more accessible. And you can ask whatever you want about a complicated topic without knowing the terminology. I often see people say things like, explain this to me like I'm 5. I think that came from Reddit, explain like I'm 5. Explain it to me like I'm an engineer. Give me the strongest argument against this. AI can help you explore all of these subjects that you might not otherwise have the confidence or even the resources to explore.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, and I know we've kind of touched on this a little bit, Zach, but just to really put a finer point on this AI slop conversation, and I'm very excited to have you just rant about this for a moment. So I'm just going to open
one
the
more
floor.
Comment?
Oh, please.
I wrote down in my notes a couple workflows before the podcast,
yes.
and I haven't shared these with Gabe yet. He doesn't know about these.
Okay, cool. I'm excited. Let's react to them.
To round out this segment, there's 2 people that might be using the same AI tool. The first person is going to think, then research, then formulate, then ask AI, then challenge, then verify, and then refine. The second person is going to ask AI, copy, submit, and move on. I think those are kind of like the 2 paths we see, Gabe, with all this discussion we just had. It's the same technology, but person A and person B, you're going to get totally different outcomes.
You know what's really annoying though, is that both of those people would call themselves AI experts.
I think person B would call themselves the AI expert. Person A would just go on and be like, hey, look at this thing I built, or look at this topic I discovered.
That's true.
Person B who just like answer response would be like, oh, I know so much. I'm a pro.
Yep, they're definitely putting AI expert in their LinkedIn. They're also probably putting a bunch of slop onto LinkedIn about how much of an AI expert they are. So you're probably right. Person A probably isn't even doing that. They're just quietly knowing that they're an expert.
Yeah, and this is a good transition because I have to share this with our listeners, but our notes here, just all it says is Zack can rant here, period.
I loved that in the outline. I was like, this is perfect. Just giving Zack the floor to rant and be annoyed.
There's just no context. I could rant about wherever we want. But I think, again, I don't want to beat the LinkedIn horse with a dead stick here again, Gabe, but I think it's become so common and so cringy that I was even reading yesterday when I was doing my research, people are afraid to use M dashes. People are afraid to use semicolons because they don't want to be confused with that AI slop. It's a fine line that I really don't think people want to cross anymore.
Yeah, and I'll move on from the LinkedIn thing because I do feel like we've beat that horse.
We crossed that one off.
Yeah, exactly. We beat that stick enough. But this also gets back to a conversation that you brought up, Zack, in a previous episode of the internet is so saturated with all of this noise and slop, not just LinkedIn, but everywhere. And AI has enabled high volume, low effort content. And that is one of the big reasons why we are seeing so many people push back against this, because again, it's so visible everywhere they go online. And it just, there's this visceral reaction that happens to it but then people just roll the entire thing together and say, well, AI sucks because, some people are using it for bad content and, just a bunch of garbage. And it's a dangerous place to be because it's not that AI is bad. It's that some people are using it in bad and unproductive ways.
It's the user problem. I mean, we've seen the make no mistakes joke. That one always cracks me up. I think that's between that and who's Jason.
Who's Jason doesn't make me laugh, but I do love the make no mistakes. That one always makes me laugh.
Or the favorite too, create a Salesforce competitor, make no mistakes. It's just absurd context-free prompting that people are using. Low context prompts create low context outputs, Gabe. And I don't know, like we joke about it, but this is stuff that exists out there today.
Yeah, and I think the hard part too with slop is that, AI output that is wrong, but not obviously wrong. It's not just the slop of, oh, this looks stupid, like the example I was talking about earlier of the silly cartoon with the 4 boxes that's annoying AI slop. It also could be that it's just taking a weak and boring idea and dressing it up into something that it's not. I feel like we're in this situation a lot too, Zack, where people are taking very, very basic ideas and trying to make them seem super profound. It's, again, never been a finer time to follow the LinkedIn Lunatics Reddit thread because it's just absolutely delightful. I feel bad for LinkedIn because we're just absolutely destroying it on this podcast. But
I don't feel bad for LinkedIn at all. Who thought like business professionals need a social network? Keep your lives on Instagram where it belongs.
Well, see, but this is the problem too, is that people are trying to treat a business social platform as a personal social platform. And so that's why so much of this stuff ends up on there too, which is super annoying. But it's also taking those low context ideas and trying to make them seem like something they're not.
You give people a megaphone. We're going to have to do a whole podcast episode on just LinkedIn, AI aside.
I feel like it always sneaks in.
I genuinely do not enjoy LinkedIn, but I just lost my sponsorship there. But I have to make this comment because I see it on Facebook all the time. And I say all the time, I use Facebook once a week. I don't post, but I just update my relationship status like in high school. But what I keep seeing, Gabe, is a lot of these anti-data center posts. And something started to catch my attention with these because I noticed the images on these posts were generated by AI. And I cannot like I saw one and it was Wyoming, had like the Tetons and like these roads that don't exist, or like the city of
Uh-huh.
Jackson that had like the state capitol in it. And I was like, well, this what am I looking at? So of course I ran it through like one of the AI image detectors and it was like, that's 99% AI. And I'm like, okay, people, like you can't, you gotta pick a side here. But that aside, just no more AI stuff.
That is very ironic, Zach, using an AI generated image to talk negatively about AI.
Oh
Oh,
gosh,
sweet irony.
it infuriates me, Gabe. But moving on from that, Gabe, what do you want to talk about next?
I think we need to, to kind of trying to bring this home in a couple of different ways, and thinking about, where we move from slop to leverage. And, it has to start with not just a write this for me. It starts with that strong point of view. It starts with a really well-defined problem and a specific ask. It's got to have all three of those things if you're going to get, better output. And I know this is an example that we've talked about before, but I've recently had discussions with other colleagues about this as well, so it feels relevant. The Excel piece, I think, is a really good proxy for all of this. I consider I am an Excel expert. I have used it for a very long time. I'm very good at it.
I agree.
However, I have not written a formula in Excel in probably 6 months.
Gabe, I just told the customer about that this week. I said, my colleague Gabe is probably the best Excel user I know. Or actually, might be the second best. I'll let you guys fight that out. And I said, after we started using some of these anthropic models within Excel to analyze data, I can only think of one occasion in the past, since April now? What is it, 6 months? I don't know. In the past 5-6 months where I've manually typed in a formula. And it was just because I knew I could do it faster. But I think that is one of the best use cases there. Gabe, you're an expert in this tool, in this field, and you found a way to analyze data efficiently.
Yes, I've found a new way to analyze data that's more efficient, but the context that I brought to that is what helped me be so efficient. And I would argue I'm getting better answers out of Excel AI, the Copilot that's built directly into Excel, or using the researcher or the analyst agents or whatever, than most people would be, because I have the context of what it's actually doing and what I'm looking for.
Exactly. Well, that was one question I was going to ask you earlier on, Gabe, is how do you know if the AI output is wrong? How do you know if it's right? Are you going to blindly trust this? And again, I keep going back to this dang calculator, analogy here. Mathematicians with calculators, again, it didn't make them, stupid. Mathematicians still understand what's being calculated. And now they can look at the output and say, well, that can't possibly be right, or that changes everything. And it's the same thing of, do you understand what AI is doing? And you don't have to understand from a technical perspective, oh, it's this generative model that's doing X, Y, Z. But again, when you see that output, do you understand enough of the context and what you're doing to determine if it's right or if it's wrong?
Mm-hmm. My dad was a civil engineer. He's retired now, but when he was working, he started out in a world where everything was manually done draft, right? Like, he had a huge drafting desk and he was drawing it all out. He also did all the calculations by hand. So he was trying and figure these things out. And then eventually in his career, two things came into play. The calculator to help him do a lot of these complicated calculations to make sure that slopes were right, and this hill wasn't going to fall down for the for the retaining wall that he was building, and things like that. But then also AutoCAD came in, where he was now doing and designing all of these things on a computer. It didn't make him dumber. It made him more effective, and it made him way more efficient than what he was doing before. But again, he had the context of how to do these things manually and was able to transition to this new world. And it's not a perfect corollary, because to go back to earlier in the conversation, Zach, I think this is where AI feels so different, because it is the first thing where there is this kind of call and response that happens with the technology versus what we've seen with previous technological shifts. But again, having that context, just like me with Excel, or my dad with, designing, designing streets and roads and, all of these sorts of things.
Make no mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. He would not have not have gone into, it's interesting now because AutoCAD obviously is trying to integrate AI into a lot of these things. And I wonder how much of it is like, build this street, a neighborhood view, make no mistakes. I'm sure there's probably engineers out there that are doing that and probably not getting very good results.
Well, that reminds me of a story, Gabe. I don't know if I told you this one. I think I texted you about this one, but my dad and I we're pulling. This was a few weeks ago. We're pulling electrical wire for soffit lights outside of a garage he had just built, and he pulls out this notepad. And he says, "Okay, we need to measure it. So we know this wall is X feet long, and we have 9 lights. So we need to place them, and I know they need to be this far from the soffit, and this we need to figure out like how much space we need in between each lights, given there's 9 of them." So he's got his notepad. He's drawing this all out. As he did that, all I did was hit the microphone button on Gemini, got his thoughts, hit stop, let it generate. And it came back with, it wasn't like a CAD plan, but it was like a graphic of like where the trusses were at, where the lights need to go, where the measurements need to go in between each one. And that took maybe 30 seconds, all from like taking his thoughts, put it into AI. And at the end, his math and my math, they checked out. But again, I thought that was another great use case of knowing what you're trying to do here and using AI to expedite that. Now, pulling electrical wire is not fun for everyone. So if we can save some time and it's like 100 degrees out, great. Yeah. But Gabe, as we wrap up the podcast here,
can we pause here for just a moment, Zach? I gotta add something really quick. So I just love that we both told dad stories, and it reminded me of a conversation that I told you about yesterday. So I was talking to a colleague this week, and he was saying that he really enjoys listening to the podcast, and his dad actually works in the telecom industry as well, and has now got his dad listening to the podcast. And now he says that they have conversations about buffering, like when they're, oh, did you listen to this episode? And I'm like, man, I had no idea that like the podcast was going to, potentially bring families together and give people the opportunity to have conversations with their dad. So, I just felt like it was so appropriate to share that story coming off of the 2 dad stories that
we've got an intern's dad. We have Remy's mom. Shout out, Jude. We're doing great with bringing families together in the broadband space.
I love it. It just makes me happy. So I apologize for interrupting you, but I had to bring that up just because it was fresh in my brain and it felt so appropriate coming off of the dad conversation.
I love it, Gabe. As we wrap up here, I had a few closing thoughts though, but as I was researching this podcast and this topic and everything, one of the thoughts I had was the biggest danger might not be that AI gives us the wrong answer. It's that it gives us the correct answer so efficiently that people stop caring if we understand them. I feel like we have to have this conversation with Janine now. We need to bring Janine back in the podcast for this. But if AI becomes unavailable tomorrow, if we, hit the light switch and there's no AI for anyone, can people still write? Can they still solve problems? Can we still make an argument? Can we recognize when the AI model was wrong? I think these are all like super interesting questions, Gabe. If there was no AI tomorrow, how would your life be impacted? I'm telling you right now, if there was no AI tomorrow, come Monday, I would have the busiest workday in like years. I wouldn't know where to start.
I would definitely be a lot less efficient, and the amount of content
also
that
lose
I would
my
be creating,
business.
Yeah, exactly. My PowerPoint slides would be a lot crappier. I can tell you that as well. I mean, it's just, I've integrated it so deeply into so many of the things that I'm working on a daily basis that just my efficiency has been able to, increase dramatically. But, again, to go back to the, start of this, we see so many people pushing back against AI because of the negative things that they see broadly in the space. And that is you are doing that at your own peril. If you're pushing back against this because you think that the only thing that it's good for is creating slop on the internet, I would vehemently disagree with you. And yes, there are going to be a bunch of people who do that. There's going to be a bunch of bad actors or, people who just use it for pointless stuff. Just like there's people who've used other technology for, what would seem like pointless things. But again, you sleep on all of that at your own peril. And, Zach, I think one of the big things that we want to get people thinking about who are listening to the podcast is how to use it as that strategic partner, how to use it as that debate partner, those words that we've used through the podcast today, to push yourself forward instead of using it to lose cognitive skills, and I, again, to go back to the beginning of this as well, I genuinely feel like I have opened up new parts of my brain that I wasn't using before, with the help of AI and with the ability to do these things that I'm able to do now that frankly didn't exist before or weren't a possibility for me.
You should always be learning, Gabe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking about this too. This is a bit off topic, but I just have to bring it up because it was something that was kicking around my brain as we were preparing for this episode. But you have very, very high standards when it comes to pretty much everything, to the point where like everything that I create with AI, I feel like is slop, in comparison to the things that you create. So I'm almost embarrassed to show the things that I create with you, because I'm like, oh man, Zach's going to think this is total crap because he has totally high standards when it comes to AI, not slop.
I've built things that are totally garbage. I do have high standards. I'm glad that's just broadly being recognized now. But I mean, to that point though, Gabe, I also see content on the internet where I'm like, did you use AI for this, or why didn't you use, like, you can use AI to improve this or to build upon this as well. But I think I've gotten to a point now, Gabe, as you know, I have, design is one of my backgrounds. I've gotten to a point where I've been able to take that foundational knowledge. I shouldn't say foundation. I've been able to take that knowledge and work that into, what I'm doing with AI. It changes how I've used AI. I knew how to build apps. That changed how I work with AI. I know how to build, on platforms like Google Cloud. Again, I take that knowledge and it changes how I build on AI. And I do have questions. I will go into, my AI tool of choice, Claude, occasionally and say, well, should I be using Cloudflare for this, or should I be using, Google Cloud?
Mm-hmm.
Like, which is the better option for this, taking in that knowledge. And it's great to, there's something maybe I don't know, or there's something I can learn from that comparison. Gabe, I wouldn't know where to buy coffee if it wasn't for you and your app. And
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think, we can say with AI, you wouldn't have been able to build that app, yet you possess
no
this,
chance.
Yet you possess this knowledge of coffee shops, or this idea of helping people, find that for them. So I don't know. I think there's a lot you can do. Don't be embarrassed to show me something. I will critique it if asked. I will call your baby ugly if asked, but my goal is to make sure that you won't be embarrassed with putting anything out in public.
Well, and I'll say this as a closing statement. Zach, you and I were on a meeting this week together where we saw some content that a customer had created, and I don't believe they used AI to create it. And I'll be honest,
Copilot.
it wasn't. Yeah, yeah, maybe it was Copilot. I don't think any AI was used in the creation of this thing. And I'll be honest, it wasn't very good. And it was a situation where if they did use AI in a proper way to use it as a sparring partner, to go back and forth, to, kind of use it as the tool to push back against the terms, the words, the best practices that were in this piece of content, I think they would have been I shouldn't say I think. They would have been so much better off, and the content that they created would have been significantly better. So we're at the point now that if you're not using it in the proper way, you're doing yourself and your organization a disservice, because you're going to put things out that are not good because it's only one person's opinion. It's not aligning to what are the best practices? What are the ways that people are going to actually get the most out of this piece of content?
You had to drop that in there at the end because I have many thoughts. I have so many thoughts on this. But again, I think, well, what happens when you need a new page? What happens when you need additional personalization? What happens when you're trying to compete with, satellite providers, tech companies that have billions of dollars to spend?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to compete with that when you are using, a legacy design system, or it takes you months to build a single web page? Like, these are all things to take into account when it comes to, leveraging AI for web design. So much opportunity there, so much to talk about on a future episode. But Gabe, fantastic episode as always. And thank you everyone for tuning in to Buffering. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and to share it with your friends and colleagues. And for more insights and updates, be sure to connect with Gabe and I on LinkedIn.